Hi, this is Emerald and welcome to the Diamond Net, and today I'm going to be sharing with you the #1 secret to tapping into the intuition. Alright, so this video is about a secret to tapping into the intuition. Now, I know that this might sound sensationalized or it might just sound like some clickbait title, but I really do mean that this really cuts to the core of what the intuition is, how to tap into it, and it's also something that I've never heard anybody else speak about. Now, in order to really get this, we have to know exactly what the intuition is and really get down to the nuts and bolts of that, because I feel like intuition is a word that tends to float around in the ether for most people. You know, they kind of get that it's this inner knowing, but it's very nebulous and hard to pin down. Alright, so in simplest terms, the intuition is the message that our feelings are trying to communicate to us. Now, in terms of our ability to read the intuition, it's going to vary by degree, and that degree has to do with how well we can actually read our feelings and emotions. So somebody, to make an analogy to reading books, might have a relationship to their feelings and an ability to read them that matches the reading level of someone reading Clifford the Big Red Dog, whereas somebody else might have a PhD level knowledge of literature and are able to read all of the subtle nuances of all of the text written by Dostoevsky. So there's a huge spectrum of mastery that can be applied to the intuition. Now, because the intuition isn't really viewed as an important thing, or is often not even viewed as a thing in and of itself, we don't really learn this skill. And so most people are on the level of, let's say, See-Spot Run or Clifford the Big Red Dog with their emotions. But the basic idea here in reading the intuition has to do with being able to be aware at deeper and deeper levels as to what's going on with the feelings and the message they're trying to convey. So picking up on all of the subtle nuances and being able to experience these insights come up from the emotions by holding space for the entire emotion to play out at full stretch. So in order to really understand this, we have to really understand what feelings are. So we have to understand that feelings are a language, and they're a language that plays out in the body. So most language plays out inside of our mind. Now, when I say that feelings are a language, we really have to understand what a language is. So a language is basically a collection of symbols that can be pieced together to communicate something. So if a collection of symbols for communication is a language, you have to understand is that we are far more familiar with languages of the mind than languages of the body. So the language of the mind would be one that works in either words or images. So we read a book and we can start to extract meaning from the words on the page because we have learned to read that particular language of the mind, and we can decipher what it means. The same thing is pictures. You know, if we see a painting or if we see a movie playing out on the screen, that's another language of the mind, and we can derive meaning from that in a slightly different way. Now, we have the languages of the body, and this is where the intuition is. So, again, the language of the body is feelings. Now, in terms of the language of the body, we also have two different poles that we can look at here. So we have gross sensation or gross feelings and subtle sensation or subtle feelings. So in terms of gross feelings, that would be things that you actually physically feel. So for example, it would be like you set your hand down on a hot stove. You feel that right away, and you know that you can extract the meaning that, oh, I have to pull my hand away. Or you experience some pleasurable sensation, like you eat some good food. It encourages you again to eat more. Now, in terms of this spectrum of gross to subtle sensations, eventually you start getting to subtle sensations, and that's where the emotions start playing out. That's where those really subtle feelings that occur within the central nervous system are, and that is where the intuition is. Now, in terms of all of these subtle sensations in the body, it can be very difficult to read because we mostly don't even realize that our emotions are playing out on the level of the body. So we often look to the mind to understand the emotions, when really we have to experience our emotions in a direct way to really get the message. So we can't just go immediately up into the mind and start trying to convert the emotional language into the language of the mind. Otherwise, it's not going to work. We have to really stay with the language of the body and try to understand it in its own language first. So the intuition is really about developing fluency in reading those subtle emotions and becoming aware of them at deeper and deeper levels. So now knowing this information, that the intuition is a message from the feelings, and that feelings are an emotional language that play out in the body, the key here is allowing your emotions to play out at full stretch. So that means allowing the emotions with no sense of attachment and no sense of resistance. So with this viewpoint, you're seeing all emotions as equally valid, and you're seeing emotions as functional. So that means that emotions are there to communicate intuition and wisdom to you, and you want to allow them to play out at full stretch so that you can properly check your emotional email. And in this way, the greatest bliss and the deepest despair are on equal ground in terms of the fact that they are both communicating something very, very important to you. So that's the secret, but I'm about to show you a clip on how this actually works out, and in terms of why it's important for you to be non-resistant and non-attached to certain emotional states. Alright, so to demonstrate why it's so important to allow all emotions to play out with a sense of equanimity and a sense of immersive detachment, I'm going to give you a metaphor here and a bit of a visual diagram. So I want you to imagine that this piece of paper here represents the entire spectrum of possible human emotion. So this is the entire spectrum that every single person could potentially experience. And so just to give you an idea, I'm going to put a middle line set point here. So this is the average person's emotional set point, and we could say that that's the comfort zone. That's neutral here. Now there's no true middle line here. There's no true distinction between, let's say, positive emotions, which would be what the upper part of this spectrum represents, and negative emotions. But let's just say that this is everybody's average, but some people's average might be here, some people's average might be there, because people have different emotional comfort zones. So this spectrum represents the entirety of positive and negative emotions that a human being is capable of experience, and thus you want to think about this as being the emotional alphabet. So these are these symbolic sensations that arise in the body relative to what the body is trying to communicate to you. So what usually happens for people, because we want to always experience positive emotions and not negative emotions, is that we tend to resist our negative emotions, and we don't allow much, if any, space for those emotions to play out. We definitely don't want to experience what's down here usually. So this tends to be how the average person orients to their negative emotions. And usually it's the case that people want to be experiencing what's up here in the very utmost positive emotional space. But what happens is you can only hold space for positive emotions insofar as you're able to hold space for negative emotions. So what happens is you have a bit of a reflective line here. And so your ability to hold space for negative emotions limits your ability to hold space for positive emotions. And so what happens here is that your emotions can only really play out in this small, cramped space. And so that creates a not only a contents under pressure situation where you're not able to fully process your emotions. In not being able to process your emotions, you don't get the message that the body is trying to send you. And in its full depth and breadth, that's when you start getting into the intuitive space. So let me show you what that would be like. So let's say this is neutral. And again, this is positive emotion. This is negative emotion. A person with no resistance to their emotion, that's able to hold space for their emotion in its entirety with a sense of equanimity, their emotions will play out all over this spectrum. And when it comes to the intuition can be found in these points here and these points down here. So it's really when you get to those more extremes of that experience and also the more subtle experience of those extremes that you really get the intuitive sense coming into play. Now, one of the things that I want to give as a caveat is that you want to identify with the spectrum, you don't want to identify with the emotions. Because what will happen, and this tends to happen to highly sensitive people who tend to usually have a knack for tapping into the intuition but can be very unstable, is that you don't want to identify with these emotions because then you're just going to be on this roller coaster of up and down and up and down and up and down, and it's not healthy. So you want to develop a degree of emotional mastery where you can hold space and allow for these emotions to dance within you and allow every symbol within the emotional alphabet to come to the forefront. But you also want to be able to take an observer's standpoint. You don't want to identify with the emotions and think, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm this, I'm that. It's just you're watching these sensations play out inside of you and you're fully experiencing it. It's not like you're disassociating in any way. You're really immersing yourself in the emotions, but you're letting the emotions just do their dance. And from watching the emotions do their dance, you start to get the intuitive messages. And it all starts with being able to hold space for the entirety of the emotional alphabet. So that means that you see all positive and negative emotions as being 100% valid and see them almost on equal ground to one another. So in a sense, you are not seeing emotions as positive and negative. You are seeing emotions as utilitarian in the sense that they are all geared toward communicating a message to you so that you know something. So in that sense, all emotions are there for a positive reason, whether they are positive or negative. If we don't know that emotions have this utility, what's going to happen is that we start saying, oh no, I definitely don't want to experience anything down here, and we're going to clench up. And, we'll start grasping for stuff up here. But you have to validate the entire emotional spectrum, and that's really the only way to read the intuition. So again, the secret is to allow your emotions to play out fully, because every time you experience an emotion, it is your body writing you a story. And if you have certain aversion or a certain attachment to certain letters of the emotional alphabet, you're going to get a distorted message. You're not going to get a clear read, and you're not going to be able to even open up the book that the emotions are writing for you. So how do you learn how to read? You open up the book. How do you learn how to read the intuition? You open up the book. And as you read, you don't skip over certain uncomfortable parts of the text. You don't try to ignore certain aspects of the story, because you cannot get the full story if you read your book that way. And the same is true with the intuition. Now, this number one secret to reading the intuition is the most important thing, because you won't be able to develop any fluency or skill with reading the emotions, and thus won't be able to tap into the deeper layers, the more subtle layers of the intuition. But it's by no means the only thing you have to do. You actually have to practice this as a skill to get good at it, just as you have to practice reading texts to actually get good at reading them. So you start off with reading See, Spot, Run, Clifford the Big Red Dog in order to get to the point where you can read War and Peace. So in this way, you have to understand that there is a high degree of emotional sensitivity you have to cultivate, and also a high degree of emotional mastery that you have to cultivate. And it's really the combination of those two things that allow you to become more skillful at reading the intuition. But the number one step is to actually allow yourself to open the book in the first place, which is the biggest problem that people have, because they tend to look at their emotions as though they're not valuable, or if they experience a negative emotion, they just want to get away from it. So imagine if you were trying to learn how to read, but you kept running away from books. Like you saw a book and you got scared and you ran away from it. That would be the biggest barrier to actually learning how to read the intuition. After you get used to allowing every single emotion within the emotional spectrum, it becomes easy then to learn how to read it because you don't have any resistance to it. Now, I have an entire other video that I just made a few weeks ago based on cultivating emotional awareness and emotional mastery. I'll say a little bit about it here, but if you want to know more about this is going to really help you on your journey to cultivating more fluency in terms of reading the intuition. So with emotional awareness, what you're doing is you are diving very deeply down into your emotions. You're allowing them to play out at full stretch, and you're experiencing all of the subtle flavors and nuances of the emotions. Just like a wine taster is picking up so much more in terms of what's going on with the wine, in terms of all the subtle flavors. That's the same thing somebody is doing when they're developing emotional awareness or emotional sensitivity. They're starting to experience all the little ingredients that go into the emotion that they would otherwise look over if they weren't paying attention. Now, with emotional mastery, that's somebody who can sit squarely in the experience with a sense of immersive detachment. So not detachment in the sense of insulation from the experience or distance, but in the sense of being able to be fully immersed in the experience while also maintaining a sense of equanimity and this observational focus, and the ability to read the emotional language and convert it into a language of the mind, to convert it into words, to convert it into understanding. So you can say it is a mix of cultivating sensitivity and detached immersive observational skills. Now, I'm not going to go much more into cultivating emotional awareness and emotional mastery here because I just made a video on that, and I'll leave the card to it above. It's called Masculine and Feminine Emotional Integration if you want to look it up. But basically, I won't go into it much here because I already covered it extensively there, but that's going to really help you on your journey to developing your intuition. Anyway, that's all I have for you for now. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead, click the like button below and subscribe, and also leave me a comment down below. Also, if you're interested in a shadow work tarot session, or perhaps to take a life coaching session, or to start taking life coaching in general, I'll leave links down below in the description box, and you can also email me for more information at thediamondnetchannel@gmail.com, or you can check out the website at thediamondnet.org for more information. Also, midweek this week, I'll be doing a collaboration with another YouTuber named Jessie Huntenberg. On my channel, it will be the topic of the archetype of the loner. On her channel, we're going to do the archetype of the trickster. So be sure to watch out for that. But that's all I have for now, and until next time, keep becoming more you.